Hello and welcome back to Sharks Happen. On today's episode, Halloween episode, we are going to go over the top 15 great white shark attacks that we have covered to date. Ranking them from 15 all the way up to 1. And we're going to go over a bunch of shark attacks that they're kind of grisly. So it should be good for handing out, candy to the kids. Put it on in the background. You can listen to the stories. And we'll get started right away. You're going to enjoy this one. Stick around. Okay, we're going to start out the show. We're heading over to Depot Segat, which is over in South Africa. The date on this attack is April 19th of 2012. David Lilienfeld, 20 years old, he and his father and his younger brother Gustav are all at Depot Segat. The boys are both doing some bodyboarding, and it's about 12:30 in the afternoon. They're pretty far off of the beach, but they're not far from the rocks. So there's a rocky land going out that's pretty close to them off to the side where they're waiting for a wave pretty far off from the beach. They're separated by quite a little bit of ways, both David Lilienfeld and his brother Gustav. And there's a person up on a elevated, it's like cliff area, and there's a person up there that had stopped to have a break as they were driving. And they noticed that there was a large shark. They could see the shark in the fin about 20 to 25 meters away from David, sitting there, like you would see these sharks in drone footage, sitting there watching. He said suddenly that shark had disappeared under the water, and the next thing he knew is it made a run at David from underneath. So the shark disappeared from his view and came up at David and hit the board, because the gentleman watching from the elevated position could not see any blood in the water, but he did see the shark attack David, and then it went off and he saw it circle David, and then it made a run at him again. Now the second run was made at the surface, and David took his board and put it up against the shark's head to try to keep it from being able to bite him. And the witnesses that were down in the water near him said that he had it up, that were on the beach and on the rocks, said that he had it up against the shark for maybe 2 seconds. And then the shark was able to break through there, and then the water filled with blood. And shortly after that, David floated to the surface and then floated to the rocks, close to the rocks. His brother Gustav was trying to get over to him, but the shark was still attacking him, so there was nothing he could do to help him. And it sounds like it was a little bit too far away from him to get there against breakers that were coming in. So he couldn't help out, so he grabbed onto David's body when David had floated close enough and took David up onto the rocks. David's leg that was bitten off also was floating in the water. They had to wait for a helicopter. Like I said, this is like a cliffy area, so they have to get a helicopter to get David out of there. And it took 20 minutes for the helicopter to get there. And that shark was still sitting there. They said it's a 14-foot great white shark. They said it was menacingly, slowly swimming in the shallows in that area a half hour after the attack. So even after David's body's lifted up, that shark is still swimming around in that area. 14-foot great white shark. It's an attack, not an attempt to predate, unfortunately a fatality. And one of the craziest things, because some said that it might have made 3 runs at him, and that the first 2 runs, they didn't see any blood. So this shark, without wanting to eat him, definitely wanted to bite him, that it kept coming back at him until it was able to do so, even pushing through the board. It's just one of the oddest things for a territorial attack to have it be like that. So that's the attack on David Lilienfeld, our number 15, and we'll move on. Okay, now we're going to head over to Matsuyama, Japan. Date on this attack, March 8th, 1992. Kazuta Harada. He is about a mile offshore. He's doing some diving for pen shells. He's got the old-fashioned bubble head metal helmet with the hookah suit, got the air hose running up to the support boat, and there's a gentleman up there on the support boat, I believe 2 gentlemen on the support boat. And he is down there, it's murky water so they can't see him, and all of a sudden they hear some clinging. He has the communication device so he can talk to the people on the boat, to the support people. And they hear clanging on that. And as soon as they hear the clanging, they hear Harada kind of screaming, "Get me out of here." And one of them said, "Shark, get me up." And before they can pull the line up, as they get to the line and they start pulling the hose up to get him up, they notice there's no weight to it. So they're able to pull this up, and what comes up is the helmet and attached torso of the suit, and the one pant leg is ripped inside out. No sign of Harada. They do eventually find his tanks down there, and I believe they find his swim fins, and his tanks have the scratches from the teeth from a great white shark. So Harada's grabbed. He's taken, they don't know what size shark. They know it's a great white shark, and they know it's probably huge. But they were going to try to pull him up, and they just pulled up that suit. Like I said, it was tattered from the shark. The leg flipped inside out. And there is a story that recording of the actual attack hitting the helmet, hitting Harada, is at the Smithsonian Institute, and it would just be clanging. That's all you would hear. But it's interesting that somewhere there's a recording of this attack on Harada. I had even heard that there was film of it, but I don't know. I don't know that they would do that back then. 1992 isn't too early for film, but but I definitely have seen a couple of mentions of audio of that. And like I said, they said it's probably in the Smithsonian Institute with that. So Kazuta Harada is an attack, a predation by a great white shark. We just don't know exactly what size. And I'm going with great white shark because that's what we're running into most of the time, attacking over there in Japan. So that's most likely, and that's that attack number 14, and we'll move on. Okay, now we're going to head over to Corfu Island. That is over in Greece. The date on this attack is August 17th of 1951. Vanda Perri, she is out with a boyfriend, and they are doing some swimming. Both the teens, they're about 150 yards from shore, right around noon. It sounds like Vanda is actually out further to shore, out further to sea, facing to shore, where I believe that her boyfriend was looking out towards the shore. They were probably looking at each other when she noticed that her boyfriend just got a pale look to him. He was frightened by something that he saw. So now worried, Vanda asks him, "What did you see?" And he's like, "Oh, nothing. It was probably a whale or a dolphin or something like that." And just after he tells her that, there's a monstrous, they say a 19-foot great white shark comes up and attacks her, getting her from her head all the way down to her waist in its mouth and biting her in half and consuming the top half of her body before it came back to take her legs afterwards. And there's no sign of, no trace of her anywhere. Like I said, sounds like she might have turned and started swimming and swam right into the shark's mouth for it to be able to get her into its mouth like that. And they should have been swimming ashore. The boyfriend should have told her, "Hey, I don't know what it was, but it was big. Let's get out of here." And then you have at least a chance to get out of there. 150 yards from shore. It's a long way, but how far do you have to go before you have that shark turn around where it's in too shallow a water? It was just a bad move for him to lie to her and tell her, well, it was just something else, because it sounds like she started swimming, swam right into that shark's mouth. So that's the attack on Vanda Perri. It's an attack, a predation, 19-foot great white shark, and just an awful story. And, the boyfriend probably still isn't over that. So that's the attack on Vanda Perri, and we'll move on. Okay, now we're going to head over to Honeymoon Island. It's over in Australia. The date on this attack, September 11th, 1995. David Weir, 29 years old. He is out doing some hookah diving, so he's got a regular suit on, not the big helmet suit, but a regular dive suit. And he's got the air hose coming from the boat, the support boat, He's got a deckhand up there that makes sure that the air is working and makes sure that he's okay in the water. He's down in the water. He's 30 feet deep water, but there's limited visibility. It's murky water. You can't see down in it. Notices that there's a big shark fin that pops up on the water just off to the side of the boat. And it sits there momentarily, and then it takes off. There's blood in the water over by where the shark was heading, which was right for the line from the air hose. So now he knows David was bitten. So he goes ahead and he starts trying to pull up on that line. Well, that line is gone. He can pull it up. There's a bite mark to the bottle that's attached to it, and a couple other scratch marks on the end of the line where he pulled that up. So the shark actually bit through the line when it attacked David. Now David, deckhand is still sitting there, and David's body floats to the surface. Now, most likely he is decapitated at this time, and that's probably what sends the deckhand into shock when he goes into the hospital afterwards, is that he's already seen that he's been decapitated by this attack by the shark. And like I said, that bit the hose, so that's going to your head. That's not going down into your back. That's going into your head. So they have some kind of bottle it goes into, and you breathe into it, and that stuff had bite marks to it. And he ended up, when they recovered his remains, I believe it was 2 days later, they did find remains, but it was basically just a headless torso that they had recovered of David's. And the deckhand, like I said, he was there. He tried to help him out, saw the body come up to the surface, but before he could get the boat over there and get David's remains, they sunk back down. And they probably floated off and were recovered. And there wasn't much of it anyway. It was a very vicious attack from the start, and it sounds like a feeding attack, which is what we have it down as, an attack, a predation by a great white shark. We just, I believe the body ended up showing that it was a 15-foot great white shark that attacked him. Was that right? 14-foot great white shark. So a 14-foot great white shark is what they got from the bite radius on the body when they recovered the torso. So that's 14-foot great white shark attack, predation. David Weir, 29 years old, and we will move on. Okay, now we're going to head over to Snapper Point, which is off Aldinga Beach. That's over in Australia. The date is September 8th of 1991. Jonathan Lee is 19 years old, and he and others are doing some scuba diving. They're diving, checking out rocks, checking out things in the water. So it's not a spear fisherman, it's a scuba. And they're just exploring things. And it's about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. He's about 360 yards from shore, and he's in 60 feet deep water. And he's obviously at the seafloor, because there's another gentleman at the seafloor also. And at 3 o'clock, he's down there and he's checking out a rock. He's looking at a rock that interested him down there. Visibility is very low, 1 to 2 meters. So you're talking 3 to 6 feet. That's as far as he can see, which is spooky to me. That's scary as anything to me. So I wouldn't be able to watch a video of that. And then, so he's down there and he's looking at this rock when suddenly he says he heard a thunderous roar behind him. Said it sounded like a boat was going right over his head. And he turned around and looked, and he couldn't see what was making the noise. He could see dust everywhere. The thing that whatever had been going by is at the seafloor. And all the thrashing, that thunderous noise is thrashing, and he can hear that, and then not only is it making noise, it's kicking up the dust off the ground, so he can't see what's doing anything. He says it gets almost by him, and he sees the tail of a shark, a huge tail of a white shark. And he goes ahead and gets himself behind that rock from where that shark was. So he gets to the other side of the rock. He says no sooner did he did that, and he's looking, he says he could have reached out and touched the shark as it slowly swam its way back the other direction. Slowly, with Jonathan Lee in its mouth. He's already bitten him pretty much in half, and he's just slowly taking its remains away. And they never do find anything of Jonathan Lee's after that, as far as recovering any remains of his body. There were other other divers in the water, but like I said, low visibility, and they didn't mention hearing anything or seeing anything. They didn't know the attack happened until the gentleman that was hiding behind the rock got up there and let them know what was happening. So Jonathan Lee ends up being taken, attack, predation, great white shark. We're just not sure what size. I don't think that they gave a size on this one. So yeah, we don't know what size this was, but just a terrible attack on him. You know, you get bitten in half like that, but that thrashing is what does it. The bites are one thing. A shark bites you, you're going to have teeth marks. And, you know, a great white bull shark, tiger, they bite you, you're going to have a big, long cut. Some of it might be individual teeth, but it's going to be a big cut because those teeth are kind of connected at the top. So it's going to be a pretty nice sized gouge. But they start shaking, and that's where everything just gets torn up. And when they grab you by the center of your body and they shake like that, that's not good. That's never going to end up good. Grab by the torso and have them do what I call a death shake. You're not going to survive that. And that's what happened to Jonathan Lee, so that's how that goes down. Just don't know size of shark, and we'll move on. Okay, now we're going to head over to 10th Island, and that is over in Australia also. The date on this attack, September 5th, 1993. Therese Cartwright, she is out and she is going to go diving. She is on a boat with her 4 quadruplets of 6 years old. So 4 6-year-olds on the boat. Her husband's on the boat. I believe her months-old baby is also on the boat. So that's 5 kids. Her husband are all on the boat. 2 divers get into the water. All the 3 of them are going to go. They get over by a Barrenjoey Sea colony. They're about 155 yards from shore. 10:55 in the morning. 3 of them are getting in the water. Therese and 2 other divers are going to get in the water. Plan is get in the water, dive down, and swim over to where the seals are. I do believe they're going to look at the seals. And they're going to get themselves submerged because they know that most attacks on divers and spear fishermen happen at the surface, so you don't want to be up there long. So the 2 of them get in the water and they submerge and go down and follow the plan. Therese is in the water last and she starts heading out, but she's having a problem with her equipment. So she's at the surface. They're already down, she's at the surface, and now a 12-foot great white shark shows up. And this thing looks at her and just does a vicious attack on her right in front of her kids, right in front of her husband who's all on the boat. The people that were in the water already can see this. There's clear visibility. They can see that the shark is attacking her from below. They just can't see what it's doing to her because she's at the surface on the other side of the shark. And then the shark ends up disappearing with Therese's remains. So they go ahead, a search gets launched. They look around and they do end up finding one of her legs. So that's all they ended up recovering of Therese Cartwright was a leg. The rest of her is gone. It's an attack, a predation, 12-foot great white. Like I said, 4 of her kids are of age that they'd be able to watch, see that and remember. At 6 years old, you're going to remember something like that, unfortunately, unlike that months-old kid. And then the husband has to deal with that too. And then you had the other divers that were in there. I mean, they must feel awful because, if she didn't have any issues with her equipment, she probably would have been down in the water and maybe avoided that attack. But like I said, that was the attack on Therese Cartwright, and we'll move on. Okay, we're going to head over to Alligator Head. That is over in California. The date on this attack is June 14th of 1959. Robert Pamperin, he is 33 years old. He is out doing some skin diving, which is actually just swimming. So him and his friend Gerald Lehrer are just swimming out to do some practice swimming. It sounds like about 5:10 in the afternoon, in the evening. They're about 55 yards from shore in 30 feet deep water. And it's decent visibility, about 23, 24 feet of visibility. And they're separated. So Lehrer is closer to shore, about 15, 20 yards from Robert Pamperin. Robert Pamperin's up in front of him. They're kind of facing each other, and he hears him scream, "Help." And he looks at him and notices he's struggling. His arms aren't at the surface or anything. They're kind of below him, dealing with whatever's below the surface. So Gerald starts swimming over to him. Well, when he's swimming over to him, he sees that he kind of being shaken around. Now he sticks his head under the water to see what's going on. When he sticks his head under the water, he sees the tail of a 12-foot shark. The shark is in between him and his buddy. So Robert Pamperin's in the front of the shark. He says the shark has him by the midsection. So the shark's biting him on the waist. And he says that he can see the shark and Robert up there, and that Pamperin is kicking at the shark, trying to keep it away from him, but the shark keeps repeatedly biting at him. So Lehrer goes up, gets himself some air, and when he sticks his head back under, shark's gone, Robert Pamperin's gone, there's no sign of anything. So he ends up swimming back to shore, and nobody ever finds anything of Robert Pamperin's. And there was a couple of different versions of this story, and the other one, the most famous one, is that they were separated like that, and that all of a sudden Robert Pamperin was lifted unnaturally high out of the water. A lot of the times when you're attacked by a great white from underneath, they grab you. You can't see the shark. It stops itself when it grabs you, but it still pushes you up out of the water. And then they slowly, in slow motion, fell back into the water. And then Lehrer stuck his head under the water and saw the shark take and pin Robert Pamperin to the seafloor, like he has him in his mouth, like he's swallowing him whole. And he's trying to either cough him up or swallow him whole at the seafloor. And eventually the shark just ends up disappearing with him, and he makes his way to shore. But the thing is that he's never said that that I can see. All the newspaper reports say that it was a 12-foot shark, whereas this other shark was supposedly 20-foot, and it was biting him at the waist. And it was biting him at the surface, and it sounds like it was biting him. It was a subsurface attack, because most people on the shore, it doesn't sound like they got a good view of the shark, that they could see what was going on, but they couldn't see the shark. So kind of like most of the attack on Popov, it sounds like it happened below the surface so that most people couldn't see it. And Gerald Lehrer, he could stick his head down there and watch what was going on. Just creepy that he's kicking it off and it's biting at him over and over, and then just disappears with him. So it was an attack, a predation, 12-foot great white shark. There was some confusion as to whether it was a tiger shark or a great white shark, but it's California waters. I mean, I don't think you even have tigers in California waters like that. So that's our attack on Gerald Lehrer. That's our attack on Robert Pamperin, and we'll move on. Okay, now we're going to head over to Baker Beach, which is in California. The date, May 7th, 1959. Albert Kogler Jr. He is 18 years old. He and his friend Shirley O'Neill are out taking an evening swim. It's about 5:30 in the evening. Albert is 50 yards from shore. Shirley is about 10 yards closer to shore than he is. So he's 50 yards out. She's about 40 yards out. She hears him scream for help at about 5:30. He's in 35 feet deep water. Like I said, 50 yards from shore. And she looks over at him and she can see him struggling, and then she sees the big body of a large fish, which she assumes is a shark. It's very dark on the top, almost black. And she sees that surface, and he's struggling. He yells, "Shark, get back to the beach." She starts to swim back to the beach, but then she stops and turns and she says, "This is a shark still there." Now, he's swimming in bloody water now. He's not swimming very well, though, and he's struggling. And he just says, "Help me." And so she swims back out to him. And she's going to grab him by the arm and take him in, but his arm is hanging on by a little strip of flesh. So he's kind of freaking out. She told him, "Look, you need to flip on your back, and you need to relax so that I can get you in. Otherwise, I'm not going to be able to get you in." So he flipped on his back, and she was able to put her arm around him and take him in. And she gets him to shore. She goes ahead and baptizes him in her Catholic religion. And then he is taken away as the ambulance shows up. They take him in 2.5 hours after he is attacked, he's in the hospital and he passes away from his wounds. He had a massive wound to his shoulder. Like I said, the arm was just hanging by a little bit of flesh, and his ribs also. It sounds like a 2-bite attack on Albert. Not an attempt to predate though. And like I said, 50 yards from shore, so they said this is a 17-foot great white shark that went ahead and bit into him. So it's an attack, not an attempt to predate, by a 17-foot great white shark on Albert Kogler Jr. Now, Shirley O'Neill, she ended up getting an award for her bravery for going ahead and getting out and, you know, doing what she could to rescue Albert. And deservedly so. Anybody that swims out into that, you know, blood-stained water, when you don't know where the shark is, that's beyond brave. It's kind of like stopping thinking, if you ask me. I mean, I'd be afraid to do it. So that's the attack on Albert Kogler Jr., and we'll move on. Okay, now we're going to head over to Piombino, Italy. And the date on this attack, February 2nd of 1989. And Luciano Costanzo, he is 47 years old, and he is out and he is doing some diving, either collecting lobsters or he is checking on some electrical, maybe cables down on the seafloor. Sounds like that's what him or his partner on the boat do for a living. So there's a gentleman on the boat, Pablo, and he drives the boat. His son is also on the boat, and he is 75 feet down, and he is 1 mile off of shore. So they're diving 75 feet down. And Luciano comes to the surface, but he doesn't just come to the surface, because if you surface, especially with dive gear on, you're going to surface up to your neck about. And it doesn't say, he didn't have hookah on, he just had the tanks on. And he gets up to the surface, and they said he surfaced higher than normal, unnaturally high out of the water. Like, I'm thinking that he probably got bit in the leg as he was surfacing. Sounds like the shark followed him up, bit him in the leg, kind of pushed him up out of the water a little bit more than you would normally do if you got up there. And he's screaming, "Shark, get me out of the water." Now the shark surfaces off to the side of the boat and starts circling around Luciano. Pablo starts the boat and tries to ram this shark. It's about a 20-foot great white shark. He tries to ram the shark unsuccessfully, and then the shark starts to make a run at Luciano again. Luciano's son said that his dad was screaming and slapping the water and kicking his legs trying to scare the shark, but it was to no avail, as the shark was already on him by the time he pretty much started doing that. They're so fast, 20 miles an hour, 2 flicks of a tail. It's ridiculous. And it sounds like that's what it did when it hit Pablo. And it grabbed Pablo by the torso, which is bad, because what it does next is his son's watching this, and his son testified to this to the coroner's hearing, inquisition on this. They grabbed him by the chest, and it shook on the way down, and that's just going to pretty much tear up your whole chest. Everything's gone when it does that. So he could see that he was done on the way down, and they went ahead and called this in. A search was sent out. They went ahead and found his tanks. They found his mask. They found his swim fins, all right there, and they didn't find a sign of Pablo. They did find bits of flesh that were in the suit, or in the pieces of the suit that they found, whether it be the mask or the other things. And I did remember reading that they found a piece of lung from this one too. A lot of these attacks where it's devastating like that, total, complete devastation to the body, the organs will float. They're lighter than salt water, and they'll float up to the surface. And many times, especially probably out in the Med, that's what ends up happening, because so many of the attacks in the Med end up being fatal, over 50% of them. So people are running into some sharks over there, and my whole theory on those ones is that those sharks are probably traveling from one area to another, and they don't have a food source that they normally have, and they're going to be more opportunistic, like deep sea fish or open ocean sharks are when boats go down and things like that. They're going to eat what they normally wouldn't if they're in their own area. And that's just a theory I have, nothing to back it up really. And that's the attack on Luciano Costanzo. Attack, predation. We're not sure what size shark. We just know that it's awfully big. They said it's about a 19, 20 footer that was there. And so that's what we're going to go by. And that's the attack on Luciano Costanzo. Okay, now we're going to head over to Miller's Point, which is over in False Bay, South Africa. The date on this attack is February 4th of 2005. Henri Murray, he and a friend are out and they're going to do some spearfishing. It sounds like they're starting to spearfish and they're swimming their way out. And they get about 150 yards from shore. They're in 20-foot deep water. It sounds like Henri Murray's a little bit ahead of his buddy. And he surfaces and he yells, "Get to shore, there's a white pointer. There's a great white." He said something about a shark. And they both start hightailing it to shore. They drop their spears most likely, and they are swimming as fast as they can to get in. They're separated by a little bit, side by side, and the shark comes up and surfaces in between them, breaches right between them. So they're swimming away from the shark, and this thing was at the seafloor, which is where it was seen about 20 feet down by Henri, and it surfaces, and now it's turning and taking bites, trying to bite Henri Murray. And Henri's buddy says that he could see it turning and Henri kicking it off. So Henri was able to kick the shark off twice. The third time he wasn't so lucky, and there's a gentleman that was on a elevated, like a cliff, and he was watching from up there. And he said that he saw the shark and it came up and it grabbed this kid, and he said this had to be a massive shark because it had the kid from his legs all the way up to his arms, like his arms were trapped to the side of his body. So pretty much waist high in the shark's mouth when it came up and got him that third time. So 2 times Henri Murray's able to kick that shark off. The third time it takes him halfway into its mouth. And they never do find a thing of Henri after that. He ends up gone without a trace, probably swallowed whole. Fish will swallow what they can. They don't chew. They don't use their teeth like we do. Their teeth are for tearing off chunks and swallowing. They're not going to chew up chunks of whale meat. They're going to tear a chunk off of about 25 pounds and just swallow it. So they've swallowed whole. There was the Malta shark, a great white shark that's about 20 feet, biggest shark I ever saw in my life. As it's hanging there, somebody's got his hand on it. It's just a crazy looking photo. They found a 8-foot blue shark, a dolphin, and half a sea turtle in that one shark. So they swallow their prey whole, and they can swallow you human whole. And probably it's just a matter of how do they attack you, because we will go over some other ones that were swallowed whole either now or in the future in this show, or in a future best of when we get it deeper into attacks. So that's the attack on Henri Murray, an attack, a predation. Don't know exactly what size shark. I don't think that that his buddy got a good look at it, being, you know, you're only seeing it for a couple seconds taking a bites at your buddy. And then the other guy up top kind of saw the shark, but, you know, it's hard to judge how big of a shark is from that kind of a distance. It would be like a helicopter shot and trying to estimate the size of a shark. It's almost impossible. So we just know it's a large shark. That's our attack on Henri Murray. December 16, 2004, at West Beach in Australia. Nick Peterson, 18 years old, he and some friends are doing some scurfing. That's where a boat is pulling you and you're on a board behind it and you're being pulled around. That's what they're doing. Nick, sometime prior to 3:30, he is driving the boat. Shortly before 3:30, Nick goes ahead and swaps out places with the person that's out there scurfing. So he gets on the board. The boat takes and starts dragging him around. And right around 3:30, he's 300 yards from shore. And it sounds like the boat was heading back to get him as he had fallen off of his scurf. So a shark came up and attacked him when the boat was almost right to him, because the whole attack took place right next to the boat where his friends were all sitting there and they were watching this. And they had such a good view that they were probably seeing the shark kind of folding, you know, taking a bite as it's going down, and it turns around immediately and it's already right back there. I think that's why they thought this was two sharks. It was reported as two sharks when it first happened. They said that, you know, he was grabbed by his chest and it bit him in half. And they said the one shark ate the one half and another shark ate the other half. But they determined this was one shark at about 14, 15 foot of length, and that the one shark did the whole consuming, and it consumed it complete. They were not able to find anything of Nick from this shark that went ahead and attacked him over at West Beach when he was out doing his surfing. So that one went down as an attack, a predation, bitten in half, and you know, a large great white shark. 14, 15 foot, I do believe that they had said about this one. So that's our attack on Nick Peterson, the 5th worst attack. His friends had to go in and be treated for shock. A lot of these stories we're getting into, people had to be treated for shock that witnessed them. I'm wondering if anybody that witnessed Simon Nellist, Popoff, was there another one out there? I think those two are pretty brutal. I wonder if anybody has any problems with watching those things afterwards, nightmares or anything like that. I'm lucky I don't have that, but you know, I don't sit there and watch those videos over and over either. I still haven't seen the Cameron Robbins enhanced video yet, but from what I had seen, I didn't need to see an enhanced video. I knew he was taken away, dragged under, because I fish, and he looked like a bobber going away when you know, a black crappie grabs our bobber. That's exactly what it looks like, unfortunately. So that's the attack, and we'll move on. Okay, now we're going to head over to Little Bay Beach, and that is in Sydney, Australia. The date on this attack is February 16th of 2022. Simon Nellist, he is 35 years old. He is out for a swim in the afternoon. It's about 4:30. He's got himself about 150 yards from shore. Don't know the depth of the water, but he's only about 15, 20 yards from a rocky ledge. And rocky ledges remind me of jetties, piers, things that sharks may check out to see if there's anything hiding there from them. As far as their normal prey, I would think fish in that case. But he is 150 yards out and he is swimming, and suddenly reports are this shark breached and came down on him on the first attack on him. Now, it seems like right after that first breach and attack that a gentleman on the rocks had a camera going. And now this is where you get the video of all of this. And what you see, and the body's kind of floating about 25 yards. And at first, it's said that Simon was screaming for help even after he was attacked those first times. But as the video starts, you can't really hear any screams for help anymore. And you can see why, because the body kind of floats about 20 yards. And in that 20 yards, there's about 6 different times that the shark must have grabbed him, biting and shaking, because there's water, red water being thrown. So you're seeing this repeated thrashing of Simon. And then after that, there's about a 15, 20 second, maybe a half a minute, where the torso just floats and floats closer to the camera, and then the shark comes back, takes the rest, and goes away. They did do a search for Simon. He was in a full wetsuit, so he's out there swimming, and some people think that he was mistaken ID, and I don't think that's something that happens with us humans. I think they know that we're not seals. That's just me. And so he was in the full wetsuit. He ends up being attacked. They do search for the body. They find some remains. It couldn't have been much. I mean, we've all seen I think we've all seen that watched this show. At least a lot of us have seen the pop-off video, and like that one, there's probably not a lot left when they're done. Those extended attacks, most attacks by sharks are over in seconds, but when they're feeding, those things can take a while, and they can take minutes. And this one seemed to take maybe 2 minutes from the time it started to the time that the shark grabbed the remains and took off with them. So that's an extended length attack. When it takes a minute, 2 minutes, that's a long attack. And the craziest thing is the pop-off thing with the shark swimming around for 20 minutes, but we've gone over a couple of those where that ends up happening. Simon Nellist, he ends up down an attack, a predation. Did they say what size that thing was? I think they said it was about a 15-footer. Yeah, I think they said about a 15-footer, but I don't see it written down here. And I would have wrote it down if I had seen. So they're definitely a great white that took care of him. And like I said, an attack and a predation. And not much left when they found it. That's the attack on Simon Nellist, number 4, and we will move on. Okay, we're heading over to Goldsmith Beach, also in Australia. The date on this attack is February 8th of 2014. Sam Kellet, he is 28 years old. He is out and he is going spearfishing. There's about 5 guys that are out going spearfishing together, and they get about 110 yards from shore. Nobody's really shot any fish yet. They have their floats with them and that they put their fish on, and they're swimming out. They get to about 110 yards from shore in 20 feet deep water. So that's where Sam is. He's 110 yards from shore, 20 feet deep water, and he's got 2 buddies that are in front of him. He's got a buddy that's behind him, and it sounds like another buddy off to the side of him. The one off to the side, I believe, is about 25 yards away. The others are within 10 yards of him, in front or behind. And at noon, I do believe it is, at 12 noon, he is sitting there, and one of his friends hear a scream. Turns and looks, and he sees that there's a shark kind of thrashing around at the top of the water, right where Sam was. His float's right by there. Sam was just there. Sam just screamed, and now he looks, and all he sees is a shark kind of thrashing at the top of the water. So he ducks his head under the water, and he says he can see the sharks, like I said, 20 foot of depth. This is a 17-foot great white, and he says its tail is down by the bottom of the water, its head's at the top, there's blood in the water, it's thrashing around, but he can't see that it has anything. So he can't see Sam. All he sees is a shark where Sam was. Now, another friend that was, let me read these because these are crazy. Wyatt Raymond is the one that heard the scream, looked. So the next one is Aaron Whitaker, and Aaron Whitaker says that he was, it sounds like he was behind him, but he wasn't facing Kellet, because he was down in the water, and he says that he looked behind him, and all of a sudden the shark right by him, so within 10 yards, comes up into view and goes up and right where Sam was. Now he can't see Sam. He can see blood everywhere. He can see the shark thrashing, but he can't see Sam. He swims his way back in and was paying attention behind him to make sure the shark wasn't going to come get him. Now there's a third guy that was the one that was 25 yards away, Nicholas Carson. He said he saw the shark basically breach itself out of the water during the attack. And then when it splashed down, their blood went everywhere, and it was kind of thrashing, but he didn't see Sam. So you got 3 different vantage points, and they all know that's exactly where Sam was. And this coroner investigation is where they all went ahead and testified to all this. And first of all, it sounds like the shark swam underneath one of them to go get Sam. Secondly, it sounds like it swam up and just swallowed Sam, probably most of the way, at least waist high. And if you're mostly in a shark's mouth, even if you're sticking out a little bit, it's thrashing around, you're not going to see it. The thing is they didn't see arms flapping around, or legs or anything. They just didn't see anything of Sam once that shark was there. So we have this one down as a swallowed whole case, and probably not, just in that one thing, but eventually that thing just swallowed him. That's what those sharks do. So that's the story of Sam Kellet, with 3 different people seeing 3 different vantage points, seeing the shark there, but not seeing anything of Sam. I don't see how it could be anything other than being swallowed whole. And only 110 yards from shore, it sounds like they were just on their way out, and just an awful attack. And the scream lets you know that, yeah, he was probably in the shark's mouth and was bit on, probably right after he was screamed or right before he screamed, either way. So that's the attack on Sam Kellet, an attack, a predation, not a trace of him found, and we will move on. Okay, now we're going to head over to Wiseman's Beach. That is over in Australia. The date on this attack, March 3rd, 1985. Shirley Ann Durdin, she is at the beach with her family, which is her husband, and her kids are on the beach. Her husband and a friend of her husband end up going out, and they're going to do some scallop collecting. They snorkel out and they're collecting scallops, and it's about 12:30 and they're heading back. Now, her husband and her husband's friend are quite a ways away ahead of her, about 15-20 yards ahead of her, and they stop in about 6 feet of water, but they're standing on a rock so that they could rest without having to, they could just stand on the rock with their head above water. So they're in about 6.5 feet of water. She's about 20 yards further out, so she's probably in about 8 feet of water when a monstrous great white shark comes up and does a horrific first attack on her, lifting her up out of the water and biting her in half. Her husband's friend on the rock had to hold her husband back from going out there because he saw both of her legs were severed. They just were not on her body anymore after the first attack. So he has to be taken in. A rescue boat heads out there. By the time it gets out there, all that's left is a headless torso. The arm is missing. Both legs are missing. I believe one of the arms and the shoulder and the head are all missing. So it's a headless torso, and just as the boat's getting there to recover those remains, the shark grabs those and takes those off and goes on its way. So we put this down as an attack, a predation, great white shark, just not sure of the size of the shark. They probably didn't have a good look at the shark from that vantage point. It doesn't sound like the rescue boat got a good look at the shark either. So that was the attack on Shirley Ann Durdin. This was the first attack, the very first episode of Sharks Happen. That's what that episode is named for, is Shirley Ann Durdin's attack. Okay, we're going to finish off our show. We're going to head over for the number one attack over to Jurien Bay. Jurien Bay is in Australia. The date on this attack, August 19th, 1967. Robert Bartle, 23 years old. He and a friend, Lee Warner, are heading out. They're swimming out. They're going to do some free diving spearfishing. They're about 150 yards from shore. About 300 yards from shore. They're swimming their way out. They haven't shot anything yet. They get about 300 yards from shore. Relatively murky water, but they can see the bottom pretty much because it's mostly a sandy area, and you'll have a rock here or some foliage there, and it'll look dark in little places like that, but they can still see down to the bottom. They're in about 25 feet deep water, 300 yards from shore. And Bob Bartle, his float line dropped, and he dove down to get his float line. And just as soon as he did that, Lee Warner says about 8 feet underneath him, the shark went whipping by him. And he didn't even know it had Bob until he looked over to the side. And he could see that the shark had gotten past him because it was doing probably the 20 miles an hour they do. It had turned and it was just shaking him crazily. Shaking him like crazy. And then it turned and he went ahead and shot it in the head with a spear, and the shark went ahead and bit down and bit Bob Bartle in half. His upper torso floated up to the surface while the shark had his legs in its mouth, sticking out of its mouth, as it turned to come up at Lee Warner. Now Lee Warner has already shot his spear. It's in the shark's head. The shark is swimming around him, so now the shark is circling him close. And he sees that Bob Bartle's gun is down on the floor. So he goes to the seafloor, grabs Bob Bartle's spear gun. Now the shark is coming around again. He takes and he shoots at the shark, but this line goes over him. Now the shark has made a complete circle, and it's gotten itself tangled up because it's got that line from the spear in its head. It's got a line that went over its head, and it's got two float lines hanging down, and the shark gets tangled up in this mess. So the shark now is tangled up in the float line, and that allows Lee Warner to swim backwards. He's swimming backwards so he can keep an eye on that shark that's struggling to get out of that float that it's tangled up in, and he gets himself back to shore. He gets back to shore, gets in a car, drives down in about a mile and a half, finds somebody with a boat. They bring him back. The shark's a little bit further away from where it ended up doing the attack originally. He's still tangled up in the mess. They went up and they were going to grab onto the tangled lines to try to stop the shark and maybe pull the remains away from the shark that it still had the remains. And when they went to get the gaff, by the time they came back, the shark had broken itself free from that tangled mess and was gone with the remains. So Bob Bartle ends up being bitten in half and fully consumed by the great white shark. They said this was about a 18, 19 foot great white shark, just huge shark. Came up out of nowhere, right underneath Lee Warner, to where he couldn't believe that he didn't even know that it had Bob until he looked over and saw it shaking him. And it's doing that death shake, which is never good. And then it bit down and bit through him. Just a brutal attack. And this is the one attack, that's why it's number one still. It's still the attack that got me into sharks. Got me into shark attacks like I am. So this attack was just, it's going to be tough to overcome as far as first place. This is just one of the craziest things. Just with the way that it goes underneath. And the thing is Bob Bartle himself, he had a yellow strip down the side of his suit, and his wetsuit, but he was in shorts and the short sleeve arms probably. Whereas Lee Warner at the surface where these sharks normally attack people, he's in full black wetsuit. So it attacked the one that I would think, if you're going to say that one of them looks like a seal, I thought it was the color. But I don't believe in that stuff anyway. But it's just funny because people blame it on a suit. Well, if it's thinking it's a seal, it would go after the one that's fully in black, to me. So that's the attack on Bob Bartle. Okay, they needed a Legends little segment for this show here for this Halloween special. And you can't go through a shark attack, especially with the great whites going through their attacks, without talking about these two legends. And the thing is how they contrast what they did. And the one is Rodney Fox, and he's out in the water and he's participating in a spearfishing competition. The year before, somebody was attacked and killed. They got him up on the boat and they took off his wetsuit, and that kind of holds you together. And that's going to be important when Rodney Fox gets attacked. He's out in the water. He gets grabbed by a great white, and he says it felt like a train, and it hit him underneath his arm, and his arm was extended because the bite goes all the way around, and it just opens up his whole chest. So you can, it's one of the worst bites that I had seen in any of those books, where you can see inside of the wound very well. And Rodney is now being pushed through the water. I believe his goggles kind of left his face, and he is now trying to hit the shark. The shark's got him, and he can feel that its pressure is just biting harder and harder. He's hitting it. Shark took him all the way to the bottom and swam him all the way back up to the top. Rodney's trying to get to his eyes, and finally the shark lets him go. He was fighting this shark the whole time, and it ended up working out for him. It turned out to be about a 12-foot great white shark. They get him up on the boat, and because of the year before's tragedy, they know to keep the wetsuit on, and that's the only thing that made it so that they could, I mean, this is 1959, somewhere around there. I don't remember the name, the year offhand, but it's long ago to where a bite like that, it surprised me that he ended up surviving it. Now the good thing is that it bit, but it didn't shake. If it did a death shake, he probably wouldn't be here, kind of like with Robert Bartle. So you got to talk about Rodney Fox and how he fought off a 11, 12-foot great white shark that grabbed a hold of him in a spearfishing competition, I do believe it was, and took him for unfun ride, I guess you would call it. And the other legend is David R. Miles. This guy ends up in the water over in California, and he's in the water. He's coming up. He's coming up to the surface, but he's looking around to look at the fish that are around. And as he goes up, I don't even think that he looked up, but above him, he is probably about 2-3 meters below the surface, and a shark, a great white shark, a huge one, had gone to the surface and was coming down at him as he was going up, and clamped his head and his shoulder in its mouth. And he could see that, you know, the light out through the teeth, that his head is inside of a shark's mouth. And he can feel a little bit of the pain, and seconds later the shark opens its mouth and repurchases on him. But now its teeth are all the way in at the middle of his back, his lower back. The shark's got half of his body in his mouth. Now, the genius thing about David Miles is he was able to say to himself, well, you better not move. If you move, it's probably going to bite you in half. And he sat there and waited, and it probably felt like a lifetime, but it was probably only a couple seconds where the shark released him, and he was able to get out of the shark's mouth. He swam over to some rocks, climbed up on those rocks, bleeding from this bite that he has, not only to his neck and head, but now to his back and his stomach. And he's up on these rocks. His buddy's in the water trying to get him to get into the water to swim. It takes him a half hour for his buddy to talk him into getting into that water to swim back to shore so that they go get him help. He ends up surviving an attack where he is halfway in the shark's mouth. So here, where you had Rodney Fox go ahead and fight for his life, David Miles knew he better lay there still for his life. Just crazy. And that's always stuck with me, how these two different guys dealt with it two different ways, and both did it the right way. If they both would have done reverse, they probably would have been done, both of them. And it's kind of a crazy thing when you get into these animals, especially fish, you know, these large sharks. And like I said, I would never want to be on a board or out there in the water where this drone is filming, where there's a shark out there deciding whether I'm going to have a good day, week, month, years, or life. I don't need a fish like that making decisions like that about my life. So that's the legends segment of this. Two just unbelievable legends we've gone over, and that's Rodney Fox and David R. Miles. So we had covered 15. I was going to do more. I figured I'd just hold it to 15 right now, and the leftovers can go into the next edition of these best of attacks that we go ahead, best of meaning worst of, actually. But some that didn't make the list that probably should have. Some of them don't have a lot of information. One of them is Louis Boren. I had talked about David Lilienfeld being one of the worst territorial attacks. Louis Boren is one of the most violent one-bite attacks on a surfer ever. It's no different than every other attack on surfers on the California coast. They're never out to eat the surfer. But this thing bit a pizza-sized chunk out of his chest along with his board. And that's just the one hit, the one bite. And they're never that hard. I mean, I still can't believe, and it was a large shark. I mean, we're talking probably 16, 18-foot shark, really big mouth size on that. The only bite that I've seen that's considerably bigger was on Jack Rochette on his legs. It was that 23-foot shark that they actually got the tooth from out of his leg. So Louis Boren was a bad one. He almost, you know, he would have made a show, but there's not any information. He was bit one night, and the next morning they found his body with just one bite to it. Then there's, I would have put Heather Boswell in there simply because she's the only test bite where I know that it went further. And that's just my thinking that if that shark had gotten her away from the people on the skiff, it was going to take her away, because it already did a test bite on another guy on his thigh. And he hit the shark, and the shark let him go, and he made it back to the skiff. But the shark cut off Heather and then did what it did as far as biting her leg off. She'll be in the next show, I'm sure. And then Ben Linden, where he was on his board, and you could see the shark kind of circle. And this shark could have went after anybody, but it just picked Linden and started going in. He saw it coming. He saw it coming, so he kneeled on his board and put his leg up to kick it. And that shark bit his leg off, I believe, when he did that. That's another one. And then there's Zeta Stedman, maybe it is. That was another brutal one. So there's a lot of attacks that could have gone into the show. And like I said, if I do another one of these, again, a lot of these might end up in there. There's so many of them to go by, and there's so many brutal attacks. That's the thing with the great white. They're just one bite and you could be done, like a Lewis Warren. Omar Conger will probably be in the next one, and that's another territorial attack where the shark kind of chewed him up 2 or 3 times and then just dropped him off at his buddy that he was out going to do spearfishing with, and he had passed away before he even got back on his board to be taken in. So, you know, there's so many of them, like I said, and that's the thing with the great white. So I kept it to 15 this time. We're going to have to do another one because I can already think of 5 or 6 people that would already be in the next one. And we'll see where we go, what we find from them. And I still have a lot of more recent to catch up on. So those are some of the people that would have made the show had it not been kept to 15. Say I went 25, that would have been quite a ridiculous number. 15 was a little more than I wanted to do. I was thinking of doing top 10, but then I got to the top 10 and I was like, well, this one's out, this one's still not in there, this one's still not in there. So I had to make it 15. Could have easily made it 30, but kept the show to a decent, I guess, length. So again, thank you for watching, and you know, if you go into that water, you are much more afraid of those sharks than they are of you.